Quite simply, software is easy, people are hard. You can have the best technology in the world. The change management of rolling it out is everything. And we still struggle, right? We're in a bunch of major Fortune 50 organizations network wide. And there are still sites that haven't perfectly adopted the technology due to change management and how it's been rolled out.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Resilient Supply Chain Special Edition Roundtable in association with the Supply Chainer. Today, we're talking about a shift I think a lot of operations leaders are wrestling with, which is moving from optimizing individual parts of the warehouse to actually orchestrating the whole thing, because having good software, good automation, good infrastructure on their own, it's not enough anymore. And so the real challenge is getting all of it to work together in real time. And so I've got three guests on this round table today, Mor, Keith, and Gonzalo. So Mor, Keith, and Gonzalo, can you give a quick 30-second intro of yourselves, starting with Mor, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Thank you, Tom. Good to be here. Hi, guys. So I'm Mor. I'm the CEO of CaPow. In my background, I'm a full professor of electronics, focusing on hardware development primarily to the energy domain. Started CaPow a few years back with two of my PhD graduates, now my co-founders. Yeah, that's about me.
Great. And Keith?
So Keith Moore, CEO of AutoScheduler, based out of Austin, Texas. We are focused on the topic of warehouse orchestration. So we built this unified control system to help plan out all of the work and how it flows through the facility. We help companies answer the question of what's going on right now, how well should the site be doing shift by shift, day over day, and how close to optimal are they actually getting to that? And the third piece is when things change. So people don't show up, trucks don't show up, equipment breaks down. How do they dynamically adapt to make sure they're always doing the best they can and always performing to plan?
Nice. And Gonzalo?
Well, thank you again, Tom, for having me. So delighted to be here. So Gonzalo Benedit, I'm Chief Revenue Officer for Aera Technology. I've been with the company for a little bit more than 6 years now, and I'm experiencing a fascinating journey as we see the world evolving. Aera Technology is a platform that is there to enable the self-driving enterprise concept, right? So helping them digitize, augment, and automate decisions at scale. So yeah, exciting times.
And Gonzalo, when people talk about warehouse optimization today, what would you say they're still defining too narrowly?
When I look at today's reality, so on warehouse optimization, but even in the broader scope of a supply chain, what we see very often is human dealings with a level of complexity, scale, and speed that they are unable to handle, right? So basically, the way they look at the problem, it requires a lot of manual coordination. Today, this is actually leaving a lot of decisions out there, right? So a lot of decisions in the table. So what our view is that there is a better way of addressing this. There is a better way of working by leveraging technology that would help you do this at scale, that would help you have a better understanding on the situation, on a risk or an opportunity, come up with a recommendation that would trigger an action. So not just, again, so give you visibility, give you an alert, but come up with a concrete recommendation, take the action and learn from that. We strongly believe in a better symbiosis between humans and technology to address and to go with today's reality in a warehouse, in an overall supply chain.
And let's go straight into the tension in this conversation here. You know, are we improving the system or just getting better at coping with its flaws? More, how often are warehouses optimizing around charging constraints instead of moving them or removing them?
That's really hitting the nail on the head. Definition of productivity today is still not considering all the available possibilities, I would say. I really love to quote Henry Ford that he said, like, if you ask people what they want, they would say stronger horses, just because sometimes not everyone aware of all the possible availabilities that are out there to increase the productivity. One thing I do realize, and I do see quite often, is that the operator's nightmare is to see a worker wait with a product in their hand, waiting for a robot to come. This is something that we see more and more. The spread of how to identify that there is an issue and then what are the options to solve the issue. There is still a lot of work to be done in that perspective. Gathering the data and then doing something with it instead of just putting a bunch of more robots or like adding more resources to the fleet.
Okay, and Keith, where do most warehouses still lose performance even when the software stack looks solid?
So there's only two ways to improve performance in a warehouse. You either work faster or you work more intelligently. And both of them are very viable, right? And there's different tool sets that provide both of those capability sets. And so when you say working with more intelligence or working smarter, one of the things that I think a lot of people missed is that throughout COVID, right? So COVID accelerated a massive amount of supply chain innovation. I think that's pretty well documented at this point. But in the warehouse, what that meant was we went from people went to buy things in stores, and then that changed to where e-commerce and online shopping became much more prevalent. So the layout of warehouses, the pick flows of warehouses had to change dramatically quickly. And so warehouses today, it used to be, all right, these orders came in, you go pick those orders, you put them on a truck and you go. But now for every order that comes in, there might be 4 different pick flows that need to be managed, and they need to be brought to the pack station at the same time, which has limited capacity, which then needs to be brought to the right dock at the right time. And so how we're actually sequencing the maneuvers through the facility, Mor mentioned there's downtime or people waiting on things, like that downtime in a facility represents at any facility anywhere from 10 at a really good site to 30 or 40% of the time that is just wasted in that operation. And so it's a huge area where they have a good WMS, they have a good YMS, but they're still missing the boat on productivity because the pieces don't fit together perfectly.
And how much of that is data? I mean, Gonzalo, what's the cost of having good data then and bad decisions?
Data in many ways is everything. You cannot leverage the latest technologies. You cannot leverage AI if you don't have the right data, right? So that is fundamental, not just to execute on the decision, but also to learn from the decision. And without the right data, you're never going to gain the trust from the humans, which with what we do, that is fundamental. But at the same time, what I'd say is often organizations fall under the impression that fixing data is not possible and they cannot do that. And actually, I challenge that. I believe today there is so many technologies out there that can help you address the data. You're not going to boil the ocean, but you're going to fix and address all the data that is required for you to make the right decision, to execute, as Keith was saying, so smartly and with speed. We have a lot of examples where systems, and we talk about the complexity of a landscape in a large enterprise. So there's organizations out there that might have hundreds of different transactional systems, and they need to come up with a harmonized view on that data to make the right decisions. Today, you can address that. Today, you can fix that. Today, you can have that harmonized, homogeneous view of the data to make consistent decisions for your business, whether you're in the US or you're in Australia. That's going to be consistent. And that's, again, it takes some time, it takes some work, but technology is really helping it on that endeavor.
Gonzalo just said something I think a lot of people miss, which is when you think about analytics and decision making, very often companies say, well, we need to go get all of our data and we need to standardize our data before we do anything. And the piece that everybody misses, and Gonzalo, I'm going to butcher what you said, but you need to be able to map your data to the decisions that need to be made. And everybody seems to miss that process. And so they spend all this time building a data lake with a bunch of data in it that never gets used because it's not the data that informs the decision. So people that just start with data and don't actually map the data to decisions often then go back to the start 2 years later.
I think that's a fascinating conversation. We have this customer, right? They were telling us, hey, we spent, I don't know how many years and a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars in moving from being data poor to becoming data rich. So all of a sudden, we have all this data. We have access to all the data. But actually, we don't know what to do about this data. We have no insights. So I said, okay, now we're going to move from being data rich. We got to being data rich, but now we move from being insight poor to insight rich. Again, another set of tools on top of the data lake to say, okay, now we have all the insights. We have the predictive analytics. Now we know what the problem is. Now we have the alerts, but we're action poor. What do we do with these insights? This is, again, today, technologies like Aera can help you take action on the data. Again, moving from action poor to action rich. Ultimately, that's what generates the outcomes, is being able to take the action.
Yeah, and
can I please dive in one layer deeper in that. We talk about like accessibility to data or basically accessibility to productivity enabled features. What I see, like one of the resisting paths is that we need to explain better at what cost, how much headache this transformation is going to add to my organization. If you talk about data, asking the right questions, it takes an effort to organize that thought. Speaking of what we're doing in CaPow, like we worked extremely hard to make it effortless to integrate this power in motion productivity enhancement solution to cut down the time that robots spend away from the route that creates value to the facility. And really one of the more critical points that we've been asked is, would I stop the process when I integrate it as a retrofit? How much toll it would embed on the organization, changing the shift in this type of operation, like whether it's a hardware adjustment, hybrid hardware software, or just pure software. It's still a mind shift that you need to do. One of the primary things that we need to at least aim to is being, of course, platform agnostic and with seamless integration as possible, changing or having minimal to no changes of how the operator runs their processes, at least from a training perspective. Then the evolution towards the productivity enhancement is seamless rather than takes a significant effort in boost training, because this is something that we see more and more of, like being a roadblock, not penetrating or even not willing to look at the data or look at another possibility to enhance an option or get an enhancement option, just because it would take a lot of toll on the engineering guys, on the product guys, on operation guys, and that can be a major setback. One of the critical points is to influence on seamless operation, with seamless operation, seamless integration, being fully agnostic to the platform, installation, or facility.
Okay. And more, what's the bigger mistake today for the likes of seamless integration? Is it adding more automation or failing to orchestrate what's already there?
I would say a little bit of both, with tendency of just boosting, like dumping more equipment on the same problem. When a facility gets more and more peak events and they're getting stressed out, and the peak to average ratio becoming more and more hurtful, like if it comes on a daily basis from 2 to 4 p.m. Every day, then the organization started to get stressed. Sometimes this creates not the most rational decisions, and most of them would be just to dump more resources, not necessarily getting really the optimization you really need, but getting the bottom line. At what cost? At cost of more complexity, more maintenance fees, more operational headaches. That's what we're here for, to change it.
Okay. And Keith, what's your take? More automation or more orchestration?
It depends. Yeah, my company would have me obviously say orchestration's always the right answer. But in some cases, it is more automation, right? What are you looking for as a facility? Orchestration gives you capacity to a degree, but it is only to the degree at which you can produce work with the actors. And I say actors because it's people and robotics in different process, right? The actors that are available inside of any node of the supply chain that you're trying to optimize. And once you hit peak capacity, and really peak capacity can be measured by the utilization of those people towards gainful work, productive work in the operation. So picks towards customers, putaways of product, things that are meaningful. You're running a really good site if you're at 85 to 95% for all of your assets all of the time. Almost nobody is there because we inherently have a unique problem in warehousing and supply chain. Warehousing specifically because you have 8 to 12 hour shifts, and orders don't come perfectly in 8 to 12 hour shifts, right? How the supply chain operates and how consumer demand works is still a great mystery in the ether. And that's a joke, right? It's just a forecasting joke for those that appreciate them. So for a warehouse, you still have to employ people for 40 to 50 hours a week. So when you're getting 85 to 95% utilization of those people, then it is you need to add robotics or you need to add automation if you need to add capacity or more people to grow the operation.
Okay, Gonzalo?
We see a massive opportunity for organizations to have more orchestration, but also drive more automation. Starting on the automation side, Tom, what we see is, again, today you are able to look at the level of frequency and granularity that was probably not possible in the past. And so that allows you to move a lot faster. Taking the example of one of our customers, they were saying, well, today we process, we accept millions of decisions, recommendations, actions, many related to warehouse management, so to inventory related decisions. So that's more than 2 million per year. And what they're saying is 90% of those decisions were not looked up in the past. So nobody was taking care of these decisions. And why? Because they didn't have the data on time, because the business was moving too fast. Now they can take care of that, but then you don't need humans. You just need humans to supervise that, not to go all the way. So we call that concept as humans on the loop, not in the loop. So they're supervising, they're guiding the machine to make the right decisions. But in some cases, it's humans out of the loop. Now, on the orchestration, there is massive room for companies to drive more automation in the repetitive decision and actions that need to be taken every minute, every second, every hour. On the orchestration side, what I'd say is too often what we see is organizations continue to operate in silos that are not truly connected with each other, right? So they don't speak the same language. They have different priorities that look similar, but they're not the same. And so how do you make sure that you are able to break through the silos so that whatever you end up taking as an action is the right action for the broader interest of that company, for a certain customer that is a strategic customer of yours? This is where orchestration is key. And again, today, there's massive opportunity for companies to do a lot more of that. We have a number of examples. So there's this pharma company using our technology to support the clinical trial process. Well, there was a gap in the silos between the team that was expected to receive the medication for the patient and the team that was doing the shipment of the medication from the center. Through technology, they were able to identify a risk and they expedited the shipment so that the patient was able to receive that drug on time. It was critical. It was like the patient was waiting for that drug on that day. It was like not like it was a nice to have. So again, this is where I think technology can truly help orchestrate and ultimately allow it to be a lot more successful.
Okay. And Keith, what does warehouse orchestration do that a WMS on its own can't?
So WMSs, they've been around for a long time. The underlying technology hasn't changed dramatically. And the reason why is we run a critical operation, right? 10% of US GDP basically stops if warehouses stop working. That's what supply chain is. And if it doesn't make it through the warehouse, your whole supply chain shuts down. So it is mission critical operations. You have to be running at full tilt all the time. And so by nature, WMSs are really good at two things. They're really good at inventory management. They are the ground truth data layer for every warehouse. So it tells you where everything is with ideally 99% plus inventory accuracy. And the second thing that it does is it integrates with the tooling on the floor so that scanners, your forklift operators are using, and it enables for task management. So when I scan a pallet, it says, I need to bring this to staging bay 42 because it's loading out to Walmart there. So it kind of informs me of how to do actions without having to drive back to a desk. But it doesn't do broad-based sequencing to understand that the pick I'm making right now is a full pallet pick. There are 7 other work queues, so work streams, so that are not full pallet pick, that are associated with orders on that particular truck. I need to make sure that I have all of those happening at the exact same time, because I have 14 doors in my operation and 42 orders that I need to work today. So I need to be able to turn this door without spending a bunch of time getting things to staging. So that by itself is a complex mathematics problem to figure out how to do all of that work optimally in a finite period of time to manage my resources effectively. And so that's where there's a gap in the market today. And just that level of mathematics and analytics doesn't exist in WMS, which is really good at data management as well as the tasking. And so that's where orchestration fits in to layer on top, provide an additional layer of data from other systems that aren't the WMS, and think through the whole picture of what needs to happen.
Okay, and more.
Can I add a little bit on that? When we just created the CaPow as a product, we set up on top of the hardware some kind of a governing software primarily for support. That we'll have cloud control management ticketing system. We started gathering data on the robots and their energy status and their location status along the route and how they interact with energy along there, and really starting to get information of how the WMS behaves or lack in indicating higher level of complexity tasks. The WMS, as Keith mentioned, is the ground level. It manages the floor It sends the robots from point A to point B, basically. But there is much more to it. As Gonzalo said, component sensitive operation and other tasks that can really optimize the routes that each and every robot take in each and every task are critical that most WMS systems don't consider. I'm saying most because I'm not sure if careful not to say all, but we really see that. So with the additional layers that we can provide, like either with our system as an API, any other additional data manipulation benefits, it becomes a really productivity enhancer. I can also say that we, with even some customers that already came back to us and say, we really cut down the production losses in the facility, like from material perspective, because less material is actually being deteriorated because the robots are executing their routes faster for time-sensitive applications. The production line pauses less often. And other layers that are not visible with the conventional WMS system, and really with small additions or even just different perspective on the data can add a great benefit, which translates millions of dollars on a daily basis, right?
So would you say that energy now is infrastructure or part of the orchestration layer?
So we would like to consider energy as an infrastructure. That's how we view it. If we treat energy as an infrastructure all the time, we would eliminate many problems that are then to come when you need to fix a problem, then resolve it in advance. We, at least in CaPow, look at energy as an infrastructure more and more.
And I'm curious, Mor, what changes operationally when charging stop being a scheduled interruption?
We can talk about the evident benefits, like you can get rid of the chargers and get more area and expensive real estate, because most of the time chargers are located in close proximity to really expensive real estate in the warehouse. More than that, the primary effects that we identified is that even the routes or the circulation or the tasks are getting shorter. It's not only that we're cutting down the time that the robot spends on a charger, but now it spends less time in queue because the management software now can adapt better, and there would be less waiting times even for the robots that are doing their same route. We have an example that robots were queuing up for like 60 seconds each time that they're doing a cycle. It was able to cut down to 15 seconds, 4 or 5 times shorter spending time in a queue and actually working. We really see benefits of those nature more and more apparent as we eliminate energy from being a bottleneck as a concept. Downtime is one factor of it, which is the most obvious, but it's not only that, it's the actual routes that the robot naturally take. It's the managing between several robots interacting that has become much more seamless and flowing, that these are the really money-making benefits that are on top of that, like getting this bulk 30%, 40% downtime effect.
Right, so the robots don't have to stop for a cigarette break every half an hour or whatever it is.
Exactly, yeah.
Gonzalo, where have you seen decision orchestration then deliver measurable value fastest?
Companies are looking at decision intelligence in a different way. Back like a number of years ago, it was, okay, I would want to deploy this kind of approach, this type of technology to address a particular need in my business, whether it's around, again, warehouse management, inventory management, logistics, whatever it is. But now that has evolved to a reality where companies are leveraging this approach and this technology to, in many ways, redefine the way work is done. So they have a broader ambition, and they look at this as, okay, what if we deploy decision intelligence across the board, again, to break through the silos, to gain velocity, to be a lot more intelligent. And this comes from almost a board mandate to say, okay, let's redefine how we operate, because we believe there is a massive opportunity. When that happens, when the journey starts like that, and when, for us, our customers, right, so they themselves embrace the technology and actually get trained, and so embrace the self-service nature of the technology, this is when you see acceleration, because it makes sense, because it's not yet another piece of technology that is somebody's dropping or yet another project here or there. This is part of the journey moving forward for the organization, but it's really important that they look at this in this way. The beauty in our model is the fact that every single recommendation the platform makes, the decision or a company ends up making, is associated to a value impact. So it's not about improving a process. It's not about providing analytics. It's about impacting the top or bottom line. Is how do I get better? And every single individual decision is measured, is tangible. Some might be wrong. Some might not be the best possible decision, but you're going to be able to measure. And very importantly, you're going to be able to learn. So I'd say bigger vision, people that are embrace the technology, get trained on it, and move fast in trying new things.
And if we start talking about lessons learned, what didn't work, what leaders still get wrong, Keith, what turned out to be harder than expected, moving from optimization theory to orchestration in practice?
Quite simply, software is easy, people are hard. You can have the best technology in the world. The change management of rolling it out is everything. And we still struggle, right? We're in a bunch of major Fortune 50 organizations network wide. And there are still sites that haven't perfectly adopted the technology due to change management and how it's been rolled out. Making sure you have a really good strategy, not just for what you want them to do in an ideal state, but also the people that work in facilities, so I'm going to say plants or warehouses, are really smart people. They are really capable of doing the job. That's why the facility is managed to run. And so when you go in and say, hey, I've got this technology that can hopefully help you do your job a little bit more effectively, you have to be very careful not to say this is going to replace you, because that's not really the intent. These are the most valuable people in the operation. Hopefully it frees up 95% of their time in an automated way, as Gonzalo kind of was mentioning, so that they can go do more value-added activities for the facility. And so that change management piece is so critical to get right. And you have to do it multiple times at different levels with different personas. Working with a site manager is very different than working with somebody who's a warehouse coordinator on the floor. And getting that right also takes iteration to make sure that you can do it effectively.
Mor or Gonzalo, do you want to jump in on that one?
I absolutely agree. One of the major thrusts would be when the C-suite, like the CROs, the COOs, and such, would have access to the impact that this type of productivity enhancements can provide. So we can work both ways, bottom up and top down. When dealing with enterprises or penetration with enterprises with new technology, typically the way it is done, especially for new companies, it is that you work bottom up. And then the journey is tedious. That's how it is. That's the startup world, and that's the entrepreneurship, the pleasure of being an entrepreneur. But getting more visibility to the guys who are really seeing the revenue, not even the bottom line, the top line, I would say, that the access, and they would see the impact that it can add to their organization and to their top line value, would add a great deal when we're talking about productivity in general, and especially optimization of their facility. The saying say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the problem is that it's not broken, it deteriorates. And it's like one small thing, another after the other. And then only when you look it in perspective, you see the big difference that you can do. The enabler would be to link between those more efficiently, from the guys who work the floors and from the guys who see the actual big picture for the revenue and really show the benefit for both.
And if we look ahead a little, Gonzalo, what does decision orchestration look like 3 to 5 years from now that still sounds ambitious today?
What we see is what's happening today, and I think this is only going to accelerate, this a shift from visibility to velocity, right? So we still today have a lot of programs around control tower and getting more visibility, more analytics. What's going to change now is the ability to compress that time between the disruption and the corrective action. So if something happens, something is happening every day. It's no longer the COVID or the Suez Canal. Now every day something is happening. So it's more about, okay, how do you build in that agility and that, again, velocity to react in the right way to a certain disruption that it's going to happen. So I think that shift will continue to happen and will only accelerate. So companies need to, in a way, work, again, helping them in embracing that. Secondly, is we look at this, obviously we have our own decision lens, but it's like the value chain is becoming almost a decision network. And again, how do you, going back to the silo conversation, how do you break through the silos and actually design, so come up with a more cross-functional design of the decisions? And again, not look at, okay, I need to optimize my logistics cost, or I need to optimize my inventory days. It's like, I need to improve the service to my customers. And what does that mean in terms of who's making the decision to optimize which metric and how do I monitor this? How do I make sure that finance and supply chain speak with each other, that the pricing strategy is in proper alignment between sales or the promotions, right? That's a good example, right? So that I'm not spending promotion money in things that I don't have, that I'm not overproducing. So all these things, that cross-functional design to me is going to be critical. Lastly, Dom, I'd say it's in this world of agentic. So now more and more we're seeing agents evolving from being assistants to being actors. What does that mean to us? How do we support companies enabling the self-driving enterprise? What does that actually mean? How do you set the guardrails? How do you define a governance? How do you make sure you're able to trust that? We didn't talk much about this, but to me, trust is a critical element also when it comes to adoption. I strongly believe in what I think it was you, Keith, saying earlier around, we're super lucky because we work with super smart people every day. These people are like have such great experience, and how do we learn from that, but also listen to them, and how do we come up with solutions that will, again, they feel like, okay, this is the right solution for my business, for my role. So that combination of humans and agents working together, being able to trust technology to make the right decisions, to take the right actions for my business, I think that will require quite some work in the coming years.
Nice. I'd like to try now doing a quick lightning round where I ask you 2 questions each and it's 1-sentence answers. You all up for that?
Do it.
Let's see how it goes.
Okay. Mor, you first. So, first question, better batteries or less charging?
Definitely less charging. No batteries.
No batteries.
Eliminate them altogether, especially in warehouse operations, closed compounds. Definitely no need for batteries.
Okay, and what's the bigger waste? Idle robots or idle floor space?
Short-term robots, long-term floor space.
Okay, very good. Keith, more robots or smarter flow?
Smarter flow before you consider more robots.
Okay, and what breaks first in a badly run warehouse?
The people.
Very good. Gonzalo, faster decisions or better decisions?
Faster decisions.
And what should no executive still be deciding manually?
Decisions that could be made by a machine, by technology.
Okay, short and sweet. Love it. Good. Now, we're wrapping up at this point. We're coming towards the end. But for each of you, a final question. If listeners should take one thing away from this round table, should they start thinking of warehouse performance less as automation and more as system orchestration, for example? Maybe Mor, you go first.
If it was like a one-liner, I would say downtime is a choice and we have to stop stopping.
Okay, very good. Keith?
We have put ourselves in a position where system orchestration drives far more value than anything else inside of your operations and your broader supply chain to the top and bottom line.
Okay, lovely. Gonzalo?
I believe in a concept that many of our customers are now talking about, which is grow without growing. To me, today, there is an opportunity for organizations to achieve a lot more with available technology just by looking at a problem in a different way, just by redefining the way work gets done.
Okay, fantastic. We're coming towards the end now, folks. If people would like to know more about yourselves or any of the things we discussed on this round table today, where would you have me direct them? Mor, you want to go first?
Visit our website, CaPow.energy, and also my LinkedIn profile, Mor Peretz at LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Keith?
Same answer, except with a different website and a different LinkedIn. So AutoScheduler.ai, we have a great team that would happily help anybody with any questions. We have a lot of good resources there. Or if there's something that I said that really triggered a response and you want to chat with me, add me on LinkedIn and I'm happy to chat. If you can't tell, I'm very passionate about the topic of warehouse orchestration and AI.
Okay, great. Gonzalo?
Yeah, I would be delighted to share more about what we're doing and so what our technology is able to unlock. You can reach out to us just going to our website, so aeratechnology.com. Myself, Gonzalo Benedit, you find me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, gonzalo.benedit@aeratechnology.com. So feel free to reach out directly.
Perfect. Great. Gents, that's been really interesting. Thanks a million for coming on the roundtable today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.